Soft hum. Today, let's break down art and culture for the 2026 prelims. We are looking at ancient history and Buddhist sites, art, architecture, and UNESCO heritage, modern history, tribal, peasant, and regional rebellions, modern history, personalities, and national identity, social reform movements and literature, cultural festivals and performing arts, heritage conservation and maritime history, treaties, scripts, GI tags and disputes, and many more.
Welcome to The Explainer. Let's get right into it. Today, we are diving into a really high-yield, fact-dense review of India's ancient history and Buddhist heritage. This is specifically tailored to give you exactly what you need for the UPSC prelims. But honestly, even if you just love a deep, chronological dive into history, you are in the right place. We're going to connect modern-day archaeological rescues with the ancient foundations that quite literally shaped the Indian subcontinent. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with protecting relics, cover the life of Buddha, explore Sarnath, unearth some incredible discoveries in Kashmir, examine the Dimnimori relics, and finish up with the Gupta Golden Age.
Section 1. Protecting relics. History at auction.
So, picture this. How does a nation actually stop its most sacred history from just being auctioned off to the highest bidder? It sounds crazy, right? But this isn't some hypothetical scenario. It's a real, high-stakes situation that just recently unfolded on the international stage, and it required some incredibly swift government intervention. Well, that brings us to the Piparwala relics. These are ancient Buddhist relics. We're talking bones, gems, and caskets discovered inside a stupa way back in 1898 by William Claxton Pepe in Uttar Pradesh. What makes them so absolutely crucial is their direct link to ancient Kapilavastu, the historic homeland of the Buddha himself. Fast forward to recently, and a portion of these exact sacred relics pops up for auction at Sotheby's in Hong Kong. No way, right? The Indian Ministry of Culture had to step in immediately to halt it. Now, as a fun historical aside, most of these relics were actually transferred to the Indian Museum in Kolkata in 1899, but a small portion of the bone relics was gifted back then to the King of Siam, which is modern-day Thailand.
Now, you might be wondering, what's the actual legal mechanism to stop a massive international auction like that? It all comes down to the Antiquities and Art Treasures Act of 1972. For your exams, remember that this is administered by the ASI, the Archaeological Survey of India. They regulate any object over 100 years old, which is the strict legal definition of an antiquity. Under Indian law, the Piparwala relics are classified in the AA category. That means they are extraordinarily rare. It is strictly 100% prohibited to remove them from the country, sell them, or even lend them out for international exhibitions.
Section 2. The Life of Gautama Buddha. To really grasp the weight of those relics, we have to understand the timeline of the man they belong to. Let's map out the Buddha's life across 4 pivotal locations. Phase 1. Birth. Born as Siddhartha to the Shakya clan in Lumbini. Phase 2 takes us to Bodh Gaya, achieving enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Phase 3 is a monumental shift. He travels to Sarnath to deliver his first sermon. And here is a huge detail: he preached in Pali. That was the language of the everyday common people, which made his teachings spread like wildfire because they were so accessible. Finally, Phase 4 is his Mahaparinirvana, his final passing at Kushinagar. You've got to have these 4 locations locked in your memory. They are the entire core of Buddhist pilgrimage.
Section 3. Sarnath and Pilgrimage Sites. India is making a massive push right now, officially submitting a dossier titled Ancient Buddhist Site Sarnath to UNESCO for the 2025-26 nominations cycle. Sarnath is located near Varanasi, and it is just packed with critical structures. First up, the Dhamak Stupa, marking the exact site of that first sermon we just talked about. Then the Chowkhandi Stupa, where he met his first disciples. We've also got the ruins of the Dharmarajika Stupa, originally built by Emperor Ashoka. And perhaps most famously, this is the site of the Ashokan Pillar. Yeah, the exact spot where the lion capital, our national emblem, was discovered. Let's quickly round out the other 3 major global pilgrimage destinations, because these are prime targets for matching questions on your test. Bodh Gaya is in Bihar, right on the banks of the Falgu River. That's where you'll find the Mahabodhi Temple and the Vajrasana, or Diamond Throne. Lumbini is up in the Terai Plains of southern Nepal, a UNESCO site since 1997. And Kushinagar in Uttar Pradesh is home to the Ramabar Stupa, which marks the Buddha's cremation site. What's kind of fascinating about Kushinagar is its historical pull. It was a major destination for famous ancient Chinese travelers like Faxian and Xuanzang.
Section 4. Discoveries in Kashmir.
Okay, the story behind this next one is straight out of an adventure movie. Archaeologists didn't just stumble randomly upon the Zanhapora stupas in Jammu and Kashmir. They actually tracked them down using a century-old photograph that someone found in a French museum. I mean, how cool is that? This excavation revealed ancient brick structures and artifacts linked directly to the Kushan period. It's literal physical proof of how early Buddhism spread into the Kashmir Valley, joining other massive sites up there like Harwan and Diaspora.
Section 5. The Devnamori Relics. Now let's swing over to the west. These are the Devnamori relics, found in the Aravalli district of Gujarat. They date back to the 3rd or 4th century CE, so we're talking post-Mauryan and early Gupta period. The ASI excavated a casket here believed to be associated with Gautama Buddha. But the big takeaway for us is the terminology. This casket was found inside a Shaurya stupa. A Shaurya stupa isn't just any monument. It's a very specific architectural structure designed entirely for enshrining the bodily relics, or sharira, of the Buddha or other highly eminent monks.
Section 6. The Gupta Golden Age. We really can't talk about that 4th century timeline without hitting the macro view, the Gupta period. Spanning the 4th to the 6th century CE, this is widely celebrated as the Golden Age of India. Founded by Sri Gupta, the empire saw this massive sweeping expansion under Chandragupta I and Samudragupta. But politically, the thing that really sets the Gupta Empire apart is their administration. Unlike the super-centralized empires that came before them, the Guptas ran a remarkably decentralized system. Instead of micromanaging from the center, they relied heavily on a vast network of provincial governors to keep their territories running smoothly.
So what does this all mean for us today? Think about it. From a forgotten French photograph leading to the Zanpora stupas, to the ongoing UNESCO bids for Sarnath, history isn't just stuck in a textbook. It's literally still being dug up. How will tomorrow's archaeological discoveries completely rewrite the ancient boundaries we take for granted today? Keep tracking these new unearthings, guys. They are the key to truly mastering the narrative of human history. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and keep learning.
Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're a focused learner gearing up for your UPSC prelims, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're taking a super high-yield journey through India's art and culture, and we're going to break down the absolutely critical current affairs updates from the past year. Let's get right into it.
You know, India's cultural heritage, it is definitely not just some dusty list of dates and monuments you have to memorize. It's a living, breathing story. In this explainer, we're going to decode the secrets of ancient coastal trade hubs, uncover the massive economic contributions of a totally formidable 18th century Maratha queen, explore the strategic genius of military landscapes, and see exactly how ancient rock-cut caves act as tools for global diplomacy today.
So, here's our game plan for today. First, maritime trade and antiquity. Second, patronage and craftsmanship. Third, military landscapes. And finally, cross-cultural diplomacy.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Maritime Trade and Antiquity, focusing on the Muziris and Chera legacy.
Okay, let's dive right into the incredible site of Muziris. Launched back in 2009, the Muziris Heritage Project is this massive cultural conservation initiative. It's run by the Kerala and Union governments, and it's backed by UNESCO. The goal here, to preserve a breathtaking 3,000-year-old cultural legacy centered around this ancient port city near Kodungalar. And guys, this wasn't just any port. Think of it as the sprawling, multicultural maritime hub that was directly connecting India with Roman, Arab, and Mediterranean traders. It was huge. So who was actually running this thriving hub? That would be the Chera dynasty. During the Sangam age, they literally turned Muziris into the beating heart of the Spice Coast, exporting absolute mountains of pepper to the Roman Empire. I mean, it was so famous, it's explicitly mentioned in classical texts, like the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, and even by Pliny the Elder. But it didn't last forever. In a really dramatic historical turning point, this legendary port suffered a catastrophic decline and practically vanished from the map. Why? A massive flood of the Periyar River in 1341.
Moving right along to Section 2, Patronage and Craftsmanship, looking at the legacy of Ahilyabai Holkar.
Now, you've got to pay attention to Ahilyabai Holkar, especially since the Maharashtra government is planning a film for her 300th birth anniversary coming up in 2025. She is a highly relevant figure for your prep. Ruling the Maratha Empire from 1767 to 1795, she was literally a master builder and an economic visionary rolled into one.
She spearheaded these massive architectural restorations of highly sacred Hindi temples across the country, while simultaneously establishing local industry, most notably the Maheshwari sari textile trade. She totally understood that a thriving kingdom needed both spiritual monuments and economic engines to survive.
Let's actually map out her architectural work. Ahalyabai was deeply devoted to the 12 sacred Jyotirlingas. In 1780, she famously rebuilt the Kashi Vishwanath Temple in Varanasi. The structural foundation we see there today, that is largely her doing, though the famous Golden Spire was added a bit later by Maharaja Ranjit Singh. But she didn't stop there. In 1787, she also rebuilt the famous Vishnupad Temple in Gaya, Bihar, which sits right on the banks of the Falgu River.
But she wasn't just about temples. Let's look at her economic legacy. The Maheshwari sari. Popularized under her patronage in Maheshwar, Madhya Pradesh, this traditional handloom textile is renowned for its super lightweight texture and these really distinctive reversible borders. They're called bugdi or kinari. Woven using a blend of silk and cotton yarns, it has this unique sheen to it. And today, this beautiful testament to 18th century craftsmanship is actually protected by a geographical indication, or GI tag.
Now, GI tags pop up all the time in current affairs, right? So let's quickly break down how they actually work. Basically, a GI tag legally identifies goods that have a specific geographical origin and unique local qualities. In India, they're registered by the Controller General under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Once it's granted, a tag is valid for 10 years. But here's the kicker. It can be renewed indefinitely. And globally, just remember that GI tags are strictly recognized under Article 22 of the WTO TRIPS Agreement. Absolutely crucial to keep in mind.
All right, shifting gears to Section 3, military landscapes and global recognition, focusing on the Maratha forts.
So UNESCO just recently added the Maratha military landscapes of India to the World Heritage List. This historic recognition encompasses 12 iconic forts spanning the 17th and 19th centuries, and they are all deeply associated with Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Now, 11 of these formidable structures, think Raigad, Shivneri, and Sindhu-Durg, are located right in Maharashtra. However, pay really close attention to the geographical outlier here, the Jinji Fort. That one is actually located all the way down in Tamil Nadu.
These 12 forts collectively make up India's 44th UNESCO World Heritage Site. Which begs the question, how does UNESCO actually pick these sites under the 1972 Convention? The absolute key criteria for selection, and this is the exact term you must memorize, is Outstanding Universal Value, or OUV. By achieving this status, these forts have proven that their military architecture holds a global significance that completely transcends national borders.
And finally, Section 4, cross-cultural architectural diplomacy. We'll be looking at twinning agreements and Mughal milestones.
You know, history isn't just stuck in the past. It's actually an active tool for modern diplomacy today. Just take a look at the recent diplomatic twinning agreement between India and Jordan. It links two globally renowned rock-cut UNESCO sites. On one side, we have the Petra Caves in Jordan, the famous Rose City carved by the Nabateans around the 3rd century BCE along ancient spice routes. On the other side, our very own Ellora Caves in Maharashtra, dating from the 6th to 10th century CE. Ellora boasts this unbelievable blend of Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain traditions. The absolute highlight there is Cave 16, the Kailasa Temple, which happens to be the largest monolithic rock-cut structure in the entire world. No big deal, right?
To wrap up our historical deep dive, let's touch on another monumental architectural legacy, that of Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. His reign is really defined by a massive geographic shift. After famously building the Taj Mahal in Agra, he packed up and shifted his imperial capital to a newly constructed walled city in Delhi named Shah Jahanabad. Once there, he commissioned the majestic Red Fort and the Jama Masjid. The city was secured by these imposing structures like the historic Turkman Gate, which is actually one of the surviving southern gates of the city today. Yet despite all these grand triumphs, his later years were incredibly messy, marked by political turmoil and a major rebellion by his own son, Aurangzeb.
And wow, that brings us to the end of today's explainer. We've journeyed all the way from the sunken ports of Maziris to the silk borders of Maheshwari saris, hiked up the steep steps of Maratha forts, and wandered through the rock-cut halls of Ellora. The tapestry of Indian art and culture is just so vast, so interconnected, and deeply fascinating. As you continue your syllabus preparation, I've got a question for you. Which piece of India's incredible heritage are you going to explore next? Keep that curiosity alive, stay focused, and I will see you in the next explainer.
Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right in because we have some truly fascinating, high-yield material to cover today. We are opening up the hidden, structural chapters of India's modern history. Often when we study the struggle for independence, we tend to focus really heavily on the macro events of the 20th century. But the foundation of that massive movement, it was built brick by brick, region by localized heroes and grassroots rebellions that challenged colonial authority decades and sometimes literally centuries before the mainstream national movement even took shape. For those of you targeting UPSC Prelims, mastering these specific regional uprisings isn't just about memorizing facts, it's about understanding the deep socioeconomic roots of resistance. So, grab your notebooks and get ready because we are going to explore some absolutely vital stories.
Now, you might be wondering, why are we focusing on these specific figures today? Well, we have to look at the overarching theme framing our explainer. We're currently in the era of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, which is this massive nationwide celebration marking 75 years of India's independence. And a core pillar of this entire initiative is something called Jan Bhagidari, which translates to people's participation. It's a very deliberate shift to highlight the unsung heroes, the tribal leaders, the regional queens, the peasant organizers, who, let's be honest, have historically been sidelined in standard textbooks. Recognizing these figures is not just some cultural initiative anymore. It has become a central theme in how modern history is evaluated today. That makes it incredibly relevant for your studies.
All right, so here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, First Queen against the British. 2, the Nani Assault Uprising. 3, Ulgulan, the Munda Rebellion. And 4, the Hero of the Jungle.
Part 1, First Queen against the British, Rani Velu Nachia.
Let's wind the clock way back to the 18th century. The British East India Company was just beginning to tighten its administrative and military grip over the subcontinent. But down in the southern kingdom of Sivaganga, Rani Velu Nachiyar showed just sheer, unbelievable resilience. Born in 1730, her life was completely turned upside down in 1772 when her husband was killed by the British. Now, instead of surrendering, she spent years meticulously building strategic regional alliances. Most notably, she allied with Hyder Ali. And in 1780, in a brilliant display of military strategy and political acumen, she successfully fought the British and recaptured Sivaganga. She didn't just resist, right? She actually reclaimed her territory.
So here's the absolute crucial distinction you need to lock into your memory. Rani Velu Nachiyar is officially considered the first Indian queen to wage war against the British. When you see exam questions asking about early female leadership and anti-colonial struggles, way before the 1857 revolt, her name absolutely has to be the first one that comes to mind. It's a major prelims pointer.
Moving on to Part 2, the Nani Assault Uprising, Resistance in Bihar.
Okay, so we're shifting geographically from the deep south up to the eastern plains. The Nonia Rebellion, which spanned from 1778 to 1800, was deeply rooted in sheer survival and early colonial economic exploitation. Long before salt became this giant national symbol of defiance, it was the primary trigger right here. Notice the specific geography. We're talking about the Saran, Vaishali, and Purnia districts of Bihar. The Nonia community were traditional salt makers and agriculturalists, and they were just being crushed by heavy taxation from both local zamindars and British company officials who were monopolizing essential resources. Led by a peasant leader named Budu Nonia, this community pushed back in a classic grassroots economic uprising.
And this part is just fascinating because it shows how the legacy of resistance weaves right through time. You have Budu Nonia's 18th century roots, leading early peasant uprisings against exploitation. And then, that exact same defiant spirit bridged eras. The Nonia community carried that torch a century and a half later by actively participating in Mahatma Gandhi's 1930 salt satyagraha. The commodity itself, salt, remained the ultimate enduring symbol of British economic oppression and Indian defiance.
All right, Part 3, Ulgulan, the Munda Rebellion.
Transitioning now over to the Chota Nagpur Plateau. 150, I want you to write that number down. Seriously, keep it in your head. The year 2025 marks the 150th birth anniversary of Birsa Munda. Born in 1875, he is deeply revered as Dharti Aba, which translates to the father of the earth. His legacy is so central to India's tribal heritage that his birth anniversary on November 15th is now officially celebrated nationwide as Janjatiya Gaurav Divas. Given this massive chronological milestone, understanding his movement is absolutely critical for your exams this year.
And here is your key vocabulary word for the day. Ul Galan. Underline it in your notes. It means the Great Revolt. Spanning 1899 to 1900, this wasn't just some random, disorganized skirmish. It was a fierce, visionary movement initiated by Birsa Munda with a very clear objective. He wanted to establish Munda Raj, achieve tribal self-rule, and, crucially, restore traditional community land rights that were just being decimated by colonial policies at the time.
Let's break down the logic here, the real cause and effect. Under their traditional Kuntkati system, the Mundas had joint community land ownership. It was how they lived. But then came the colonial threat. The British brought in Dikus, that's a crucial term, meaning outsiders, like moneylenders and zamindars. This led to severe land alienation and bitbagari, which is forced labor. The Munda Rebellion directly targeted this exploitation, and while they were militarily suppressed in the end, the outcome was huge. It essentially forced the British to pass the Chotan-Nagpur Tenancy Act of 1908, legally protecting tribal land rights from outsiders. Understanding this exact flow, from the traditional system to the threat to the legislative outcome, that is precisely how you master prelims questions.
And finally, Part 4, the hero of the jungle, Alluri Sitarama Raju. Shifting gears over to the Godavari Agency area in Andhra Pradesh, the root cause of the resistance here wasn't some abstract idea of freedom. It was deeply, deeply tied to livelihood and everyday resources. In 1882, the British enacted the Madras Forest Act. This law classified forests into reserved and protected categories, which severely restricted the traditional rights of tribal communities. It entirely banned their traditional shifting cultivation, known locally as podu or jhum. Imagine that. Fast forward to 1922, and this oppressive legislation just boils over into the Rampa Rebellion. Led by Alluri Sitarama Raju, the local Koya tribes rose up in a fierce armed struggle to take back their forest rights. What makes Alluri Sitarama Raju, who is famously known as Menyam Virudu, or the hero of the jungle, so incredibly interesting is how he synthesized national trends with local action. He was heavily inspired by the Bengal revolutionaries and Mahatma Gandhi's non-cooperation movement of 1920. Just look at his early strategies. He encouraged tribals to rely on local panchayats for justice, urging a complete boycott of colonial courts. He initially preached non-cooperation. However, realizing the brutal, violent realities of the colonial crackdown on their forest rights, he eventually adapted his strategy. He pivoted to leading a full-scale armed resistance before tragically being captured and executed in 1924. It just goes to show how fluid and adaptive these unsung leaders really had to be. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. How does understanding the specific causes of these grassroots regional uprisings like the Kuntkati system for the Mundas, or the Podu cultivation ban for the Koyas, or the early salt taxes in Bihar, how does that change our perspective on the larger story of India's fight for independence? It really transforms our view from a simple, top-down political narrative into a complex, bottom-up struggle for survival, for resources, and for dignity. These unsung heroes didn't just fight for a nation, they fought for their land, their traditions, and their communities. Keep these structural stories fresh in your mind, and you will navigate your prelims history section with a completely new level of clarity. Keep analyzing, keep focused, and I will catch you in the next explainer.
Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're cutting through all the noise to break down the intellectual, legislative, and revolutionary milestones of modern Indian history. Whether you're actively prepping for the UPSC Prelims or you're just eager to understand the foundational pillars of India's past, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going straight to the pivotal moments that shaped the nation, translating these vast historical timelines into a clear, thematic journey through the lives of the figures who literally built modern India.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're exploring 5 distinct historical pathways, starting with the economic arguments against colonial rule, moving right into the legislative battles, taking a look at our national symbols, exploring post-independence political governance, and finally, closing out with the armed revolutionary movement.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the Drain of Wealth and Dadabhai Nairoji's Economic Critique.
You know, before mass protests ever took to the streets, the battle was actually intellectual. The drain of wealth theory was a real game changer. It fundamentally shifted how Indians viewed colonial rule. It framed it not just as a political occupation, but as an active, systematic financial extraction. Basically, India's resources were being siphoned off with absolutely nothing coming back to fuel local growth.
Now, if you are making exam notes, definitely jot down the exact mechanisms Nairoji identified, because it wasn't just raw materials being shipped away. Indian taxpayers were literally funding the salaries and pensions of the very British officials governing them. Add in corporate profits and those notorious home charges paid directly to London, and well, you have a systematic checklist of colonial economic exploitation. But keep in mind, Nauroji, respectfully known as the Grand Old Man of India, wasn't just a theorist writing from the sidelines. No, he pushed this economic critique straight into the heart of the British Empire. By becoming the first Indian elected to the British Parliament back in 1892, he used his position in the House of Commons to demand accountability directly from the source.
Moving on to Section 2, Pioneering the Assembly, focusing on Vitpalbhai Patel's legislative milestones.
So, Vittalbhai Patel, who was the elder brother of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, methodically worked his way through the ranks of colonial legislative power. And crucially for us right now, we are marking exactly 100 years since his historic 1925 presidency. That makes him a highly relevant figure for your current studies. To truly understand his achievement, you really have to grasp the environment he was operating in. Established under the Government of India Act of 1919, the Central Legislative Assembly was heavily restricted. The Governor-General retained overriding authority. Yet Patel somehow navigated this heavily stacked deck to become its first elected Indian president, proving beyond a doubt that Indians could master and lead complex parliamentary procedures.
Let's transition to Section 3, Colors of the Nation. Enter Pingali Venkaya and the story of the national flag.
Tracing the visual journey of our national symbol is just incredible. The design iterates and evolves from 1906 onwards, perfectly reflecting the changing political landscape and the ideologies of the freedom struggle. The 1921 design specifically marks a vital turning point in uniting the masses under one single banner.
And the flag was truly a collaborative symbol of unity. Pingali Venkaya, who is fondly remembered as Janda Venkaya, presented his initial red and green design in 1921 at Vijayawada. Then it was Mahatma Gandhi who insightfully suggested adding the white stripe. That ensured the flag represented the broader, encompassing diversity of all the other communities across the nation. Up next is Section 4, Ideologies and Governance. Let's dig into post-independence political framing.
Let's look at Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee and his incredibly diverse trajectory. He started out as a brilliant academic, becoming the youngest vice-chancellor of the University of Calcutta. His political path saw him associated with the Hindu Mahasabha, then serving as a minister in Jawaharlal Nehru's first post-independence cabinet, before eventually stepping away to found his own political party entirely, the Bharatiya Jana Sangh.
His fierce ideological stance was perfectly captured in his famous slogan, एक देश में दो विधान, दो निशान, दो प्रधान नहीं चलेंगे. Translated, that means one country cannot have two constitutions, two flags, and two prime ministers. This formed the absolute core of his staunch opposition to the Article 370 provisions for Jammu and Kashmir, a campaign during which he was actually arrested and subsequently died in custody in 1953.
But you might be wondering, what actually caused his initial split from the government? Well, it came down to a major disagreement over the Nehru-Liaquat Pact of 1950. While the pact aimed to protect minorities in both India and Pakistan following the immense trauma of partition, Dr. Mukherjee fundamentally disagreed with its approach, and that's what prompted his resignation from Nehru's cabinet.
On another side of the post-independence governance spectrum, we have C. Rajagopalachari, affectionately known as Rajaji. I mean, his resume is just astounding. He led the Vidaranyam Salt Satyagraha in the south, parallel to Gandhi's Dandi March. He held the absolute highest office as the first and last Indian Governor-General. And remarkably, much like Mukherjee, he also founded his own opposition party later in life, the Swatantra Party, which notably championed a free market economy.
All right, so far we've looked at debates, laws, pacts, and peaceful marches. This brings us to a stark shift in tone. We have to ask ourselves, what was happening outside these legislative halls and nonviolent spheres?
And that brings us to our final section, the Kakori Train Action and the Hindustan Republican Association. The Hindustan Republican Association underwent this incredibly intense, rapid, and sacrificial journey during the 1920s. Founded in 1924, they wasted no time. By 1925, they executed the Kakori Action, daringly targeting a train carrying a government treasury to fund armed resistance. The British retaliation was swift and brutal, leading to the executions of key leaders by 1927, which ultimately forced the group to reorganize a year later.
These are the four men who paid the ultimate price in 1927: Ram Prasad Bismil, Ashfaqullah Khan, Rajendranath Lahiri, and Thakul Raushin Singh. Now, a really crucial point for exam takers to note is a specific historical nuance here. While all four were hanged on charges related to the Kakuri incident, Thakul Raushin Singh was notably not a direct participant in the train action itself, even though he was deeply involved in the HRA's broader revolutionary activities.
So we've seen Nauroji's intellect, Patel's strategy, the profound unity of Venkaiah's flag, the post-independence visions of Mukherjee and Rajaji, and the ultimate sacrifice of the Kakuri martyrs. I want to leave you with this. Which of these diverse approaches do you believe was the most vital in shaping modern India? Think about how they interacted, how they overlapped, to build the nation we know today. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and keep staying curious.
Hey everyone, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're tackling something absolutely crucial for your upcoming UPSC prelims. If you're looking to master the intricacies of modern Indian history and art and culture, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to visually unpack some massive historical anniversaries that are making headlines right now. Here is our roadmap for today. Anniversaries of social reform, Gandhi versus Narayana Guru, the Vaikam Satyagraha, the self-respect movement, broader anti-caste movements, and finally the Arya Samaj and Vande Mataram. Section 1. Anniversaries of social reform. Okay, so here's our massive narrative anchor. 2025 marks the exact 100-year centenary of a truly historic dialogue. On March 12, 1925, Mahatma Gandhi traveled all the way to the Sivagiri Mutt in Kerala to sit down with the revered philosopher Sri Narayana Guru. And look, this wasn't just some polite, formal chat. It was a profound meeting of minds that sparked a legendary ideological clash over how to actually reform society. Section 2. Gandhi versus Narayana Guru. Now, both of these men obviously wanted social upliftment, but their roadmaps, they couldn't have been more different. Sri Narayana Guru demanded the absolute, total abolition of the Varna system. He completely denied any religious basis for untouchability, famously advocating for one caste, one religion, one God. Gandhi, on the flip side, viewed untouchability as a sin, yes, but he actually supported the Hindu Varna system at that time. He was looking for gradual, moral reform from within the system. They even went back and forth on nonviolence. Gandhi saw it as an absolute rule, while the Guru took a much more practical stance. So this brilliantly illustrates that conceptual divide between reform from the outside versus reform from within. But, ideas don't just clash in a vacuum. What specific boots-on-the-ground movement actually necessitated this famous 1925 meeting? Section 3, the Vaikam Satyagraha. Well, this was the boots-on-the-ground reality that brought Gandhi to Kerala. The Vaikam Satyagraha wasn't just some minor local dispute. It's actually recognized as one of India's very first organized anti-caste movements. Its goal was highly specific but deeply symbolic, securing the right for oppressed castes to simply walk on the public roads surrounding the Vaikam temple. Ultimately, it was a foundational demand for basic human dignity. Section 4, the self-respect movement. As we shift over to Tamil Nadu, E.V. Ramasamy Periyar's political evolution during this exact era is just staggering. In 1924, he travels down to Kerala to actively participate in the Vaikam Satyagraha. Then, the very next year, exactly 100 years ago in 1925, he launches the self-respect movement in South India. And by 1932, alongside communist trade unionist Singaravelu Chettiar, he organizes the Self-Respect Socialist Party. It's this rapid, fiery progression from being a local protest participant to the founder of a massive political awakening. When you think of Periyar for the exam, you've got to have these key milestones locked in your memory. His bold participation in Kerala earned him the title Vaikam Veeran. He launched the massively influential Tamil weekly Kudiyarasu and founded the Dravidar Kazhagam. Crucially, he described his 1925 movement as Arivu Vidutalai Yakam. That literally means a movement to liberate the intellect. He was fiercely advocating for rationalism, tearing down caste hierarchy, and challenging religious orthodoxy. Section 5. Broader anti-caste movements. Of course, these sparks in Kerala and Tamil Nadu were part of a much wider nationwide fire. Long before Vaikam, back in 1873, Jyotirao Phule founded the Satya Sodak Samaj to uplift Shudras and Dalits. Then, right around the time of the Vaikam protests in 1924, B.R. Ambedkar formed the Baish Krit Hitkarini Sabha to demand political safeguards. And by 1932, Gandhi himself had set up the All India Anti-Untouchability League. The simultaneous rise of all these organizations really proves just how central the eradication of untouchability was to the broader Indian freedom struggle. All right, we are shifting gears now from the 100-year centenaries to two monumental 150-year anniversaries that were developing in parallel, just slightly earlier in the historical timeline.
Section 6, Arya Samaj and Vande Mataram. So 2025 also marks exactly 150 years since Swami Dayanand Saraswati established the Arya Samaj in Bombay. His movement tackled social reform from a completely different angle, a back to the Vedas agenda. Encapsulated in his famous text, the Satyarth Prakash, he advocated for monotheism and vehemently rejected idol worship. Most importantly for our theme today, he actively opposed caste by birth and child marriage, pushing instead for women's education and widow remarriage through the DAV network. His ultimate vision? Krinvanto Vishwam Aryam, let us ennoble the world. And beautifully tying into this whole era of immense cultural and social awakening is another 150-year milestone. During this exact same period, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya composed the national song Vande Mataram. This iconic composition, which practically became the rallying cry for the entire Indian independence movement, is also currently celebrating its 150th anniversary. It's a great reminder of how cultural pride and social reform were marching hand in hand during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We looked at the centenaries of the Vaikom Satyagraha, the self-respect movement, and the 150th anniversaries of the Arya Samaj and Vande Mataram. But I want to leave you with this final thought to really ponder as you review your polity and history notes. How did the blood, sweat, and ideologies of these very movements, from Periyar's push for proportionate representation to Ambedkar's Bahashkrit Hidkarni Sabha, ultimately forge the fundamental rights we rely on today? Think about Article 15 or Article 17 abolishing untouchability. Keep that connection in mind, because linking historical movements to constitutional outcomes is exactly what examiners are looking for. Thank you for joining me in this explainer, and keep that focus sharp. Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something really practical. We are taking a highly structured geographical journey across India to visually map out the crucial festivals and performing arts that you absolutely need to know for your UPSC prelims. Our goal here isn't just to memorize a bunch of isolated facts. We want to create a vivid mental map of India's rich cultural tapestry, and we'll be linking geography, history, and even modern legal frameworks together in a way that, well, actually sticks in your brain. All right, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with Northern devotion and mysticism, then head over to Assam for faith and folk dance. After that, we'll hit Central India's tribal heartbeat, move down to South Indian faith and flora, and finally wrap up in Goa looking at culture versus animal law. Let's get into it.
Okay, Part 1, Northern Devotion and Mysticism, specifically focusing on Jammu and Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh.
First up, we're heading to Jammu and Kashmir for the Heer Bhawani Festival. This is a massive annual celebration held on the highly auspicious day of Jyeshta Ashtami. So, for the exam, you've got to remember a very specific trio of facts. You need to associate its exact location at the Heer Bhawani Temple in Ganderbal with the worship of goddess Ragni Devi. And Ragni Devi, by the way, is revered as a powerful form of the goddess Durga. The festival gets its name because devotees traditionally offer kheer, that delicious sweet rice pudding, directly to the deity. Take a mental snapshot of that right now. Ganderbal, Ragni Devi, and Jyeshta Ashtami. Moving just a bit south into Himachal Pradesh, we run into something truly mind-blowing. Get this. The Rao Lane Festival is a 5,000-year-old traditional tribal festival. 5,000 years. It's celebrated in the Kinnar district, and it honors these mystical celestial fairies known locally as Sawnis. The ritual itself is fascinating. Two men act as a symbolic groom, called the Raula, and a bride, the Rao Lane. They are completely decked out in traditional Kannuri woolens with intricate masks and ornaments to represent these mystical beings. They then do this slow, beautiful devotional procession and dance all the way to the Nagen Narayan temple. Moving right along to Section 2, Assam, Faith and Folk Dance. Now, this is a brilliant example of how deeply geography and faith intertwine. Every year, thousands of devotees flock to Assam for the Ambubachi Mela. This festival actually marks the annual menstruation of goddess Kamakya, who is a massively important figure in the Shakti tradition. And the timing? Totally not a coincidence. It's usually observed in June, symbolizing the onset of the monsoon and the ancient belief that the earth is a fertile woman. In fact, the word Ambubachi roughly translates to water flowing. The Kamakya temple itself sits up on Nilachal Hill and is one of the 51 Shakti Pithas. The main shrine is super unique because it represents the yoni, directly symbolizing fertility. Oh, and for the history buffs out there, keep in mind that this temple was rebuilt in the 16th century by the Koch king Narayana.
To really lock this in your brain for the exam, let's put it side by side with another major Assamese event. While Ambabachi Mela is driven by the monsoon and centers on the Kamakya temple, you have the Bagarumba dance, which is tied to the Buisagu festival. Buisagu is the main festival for the Bodo tribe, marking their new year right in mid-April. It's all about spring and renewal. During this festival, Bodo women perform the Bagarumba. It's this incredibly graceful folk dance that mimics butterflies, birds, and nature, which is why it's commonly known as the butterfly dance. The dancers wear this vibrant traditional outfit called the dokana. Contrasting the monsoon-heavy Ambabachi with this spring-focused Buisagu is a great way to remember the sheer diversity of Assam's culture.
All right, shifting gears to Section 3, Central India's tribal heartbeat, specifically looking at Chhattisgarh. For the prelims, you absolutely have to know the indigenous traditions of the Bastar region. The big one here is the Bison Horn Maria dance. It's a traditional tribal dance performed by the Maria or Gore Maria tribe, which is actually a subgroup of the larger Gond community. As you can probably guess from the name, it's famous for this incredible, distinctive headgear that is decorated with actual bison horns. It's a staple at local marriages and festivals. Then, right alongside that, you have the Bastar Pandum Festival. This is a huge cultural touchstone for both the Gond and Moria tribes. It's a full-on immersive experience. Lots of traditional folk dances, massive community feasts, and the deep worship of local deities and nature spirits.
Down to Section 4 now, South Indian faith and flora.
Let's start in Telangana with Bathukama. Have you heard of this one? It's a massive, stunningly vibrant floral festival observed primarily by women during September and October, which means it coincides perfectly with Durga Navaratri. The word Bathukama literally translates to Mother Goddess Come Alive. It's just a beautiful celebration of life, nature, and femininity. The whole thing spans 9 days, wrapping up with Sadula Bathukama on the final day, before smoothly transitioning right into the Bodma festival, which marks the shift into the monsoon season. Now here's the kind of historical curveball UPSC absolutely loves. Most people associate Bathukama strictly with goddess Gauri, but some traditions intriguingly link it to King Dramangada and Queen Satyavati of the legendary Chola dynasty. The Cholas were this powerhouse South Indian empire from the 9th to the 13th century CE, based mostly down in the Kaveri Delta in Tamil Nadu. Their capitals were at Tanjavur and leader Gangaikonda Cholapuram, and they were famous for their jaw-dropping temple architecture and bronze sculptures. Tying a modern floral festival in Telangana back to Chola royalty is exactly the kind of cross-regional linkage that makes studying history so cool.
Staying in the south, let's talk about Thaipusam. To really grasp this festival, you need to know who it's dedicated to. Celebrated heavily by the Tamil community in India and also in places like Malaysia and Singapore, Thaipusam is entirely focused on Lord Murugan. You might know him as Kartikeya or Skanda, the god of war and victory. It happens during the full moon, or Purnima, in the Tamil month of Thai, so usually January or February. At its heart, Thaipusam commemorates the moment goddess Parvati gave Murugan the Vel, a divine spear used to defeat evil. And the devotion here is intense, guys. Rituals involve devotees carrying heavy physical burdens known as kavadi, and even engaging in elaborate body piercings to show their spiritual dedication.
And for our final stop, Section 5, Goa. We're looking at culture versus animal law.
This part is fascinating because it perfectly frames a potential exam question about heritage versus modern law. We're looking at Dirio or Dirio Zoos, which is traditional bull versus bullfighting in Goa. Now, on one side, you have legislators across various political parties arguing that Dirio should be legalized because it's an indispensable part of Goan cultural heritage. But on the flip side, the legal reality is incredibly strict. The Bombay High Court at Goa bans the practice back in 1996 due to serious animal welfare concerns, and that was cemented in 2014 when the Supreme Court issued a sweeping order prohibiting all animal races and fights nationwide. We are impartially looking at both sides of this because understanding that friction between local tradition and national law is a massive theme for the exam.
So, what's the legal bedrock here? It's the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act from 1960. This act is the primary legal framework for animal welfare in India. Its whole aim is to prevent unnecessary pain to animals, and crucially, it established the Animal Welfare Board of India, or AWBI.
The Act explicitly defines what constitutes cruelty, things like beating, overloading, or neglect, and it outright prohibits cruel practices like animal fights. This exact piece of legislation is what the courts have continually used to override the cultural preservation arguments in cases like Territorial.
So I want to leave you with this to ponder. How do we balance the preservation of these ancient, deeply rooted traditions with the enforcement of modern legal and ethical frameworks? Whether it's the mystic rites of the Raulini Festival, the fertility celebrations of Ambubachi, the Chola-linked floral arrangements of Batucama, or the complex legal battles over going bullfighting, one thing is for sure: culture is never static. Thinking critically about how all these traditions interact with modern Indian law is exactly what's going to turn the facts from this explainer into real success on test day. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep up the great work with your prep.
Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. If you're gearing up for your upcoming UPSC Prelims, you are in exactly the right place. Today's session is basically a masterclass on how ancient Indian heritage connects with modern conservation efforts. We're going to dive into how the past is being preserved, digitized, and in some cases, literally rebuilt today. I know you want high-yield, efficient learning, so we're going to break this all down so it sticks in your memory. Let's get started.
Here is our cognitive roadmap for today. First, India on the UNESCO map. Second, reviving ancient maritime history. Third, preserving India's archival memory. And fourth, monuments and museums.
Okay, let's dive right into our first bucket. India on the UNESCO map, global recognition of local culture.
Take a look at this. It's a massive, vibrant celebration of culture, food, and architecture. And honestly, it perfectly captures the whole vibe of culture-led sustainable urban development. That is the exact focus of the UNESCO Creative Cities Network, or UCCN. Set up back in 2004, this network basically says, hey, culture and creativity aren't just things of the past. They are vital, active drivers for how our cities develop today.
So what's making headlines right now? Lucknow just grabbed the spotlight by being named a UNESCO Creative City of Gastronomy. It's a huge nod to its rich culinary heritage and those centuries-old food traditions that are still thriving. Now for your exams, here is the critical stuff you absolutely must remember about the UCCN. It covers 7 creative fields: crafts and folk art, design, film, gastronomy, literature, media arts, and music. But here's the golden rule. Do not forget this. A city can only be designated in one category at a time. No double dipping.
All right, let's break down this matrix of the 9 Indian cities currently in the network. This is highly testable, so lock this in. For crafts and folk arts, you've got Jaipur and Srinagar. For music, it's Varanasi, Chennai, and Gwalior. Mumbai, as you'd probably guess, holds the film designation. For gastronomy, the newly added Lucknow joins Hyderabad, and for literature, we have Kozhikode. The trick here, link the city's most famous cultural export directly to its category in your head. It makes memorizing this a breeze.
Moving on to our second section, reviving ancient maritime history from canvas to ocean.
I want to pause here and ask you something. How exactly does a 5th century cave painting inspire the modern Indian Navy? Think about that for a second. It sounds like the plot of an adventure movie, right? But it is a very real, incredibly fascinating military project happening right now. Let's look at how they pulled this off.
The answer lies in the Tangkai method. This is a 2,000-year-old ancient technique of what we call stitched shipbuilding. And the wildest detail here, 0 metal nails. Literally none. Instead, wooden planks are meticulously stitched together using coir ropes. This isn't just some quirky historical footnote. It is a remarkably resilient engineering method that our ancestors absolutely perfected.
Which brings us to the INS Kondinya. The Indian Navy just formally inducted this indigenously built vessel constructed entirely using that exact Tangkai method. It was a massive team effort, a tripartite project between the Ministry of Culture, the Indian Navy, and MS Hodi Innovations. The actual design? Pulled straight from a 5th century CE ship painted inside the Ajanta caves. And the name, Kondinya, pays homage to a legendary 1st century Indian mariner. This guy literally sailed to Southeast Asia, married Queen Soma, and actually became the king of the Funan Kingdom in present-day Cambodia. Talk about some serious historical cultural outreach. Since this ship's blueprint came from the Ajanta caves, let's do a super quick review because the UPSC loves targeting this topic. Located in the Sayadri Hills along the Wagora River, this is a stunning collection of 30 rock-cut Buddhist caves, famously declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983. You absolutely need to know these specific paintings. The Padmapani Bodhisattva, representing compassion. The Vajrapani Bodhisattva, the protector. The Mahajanaka and Chadanta Jatakas, that's the one with the six-tusked elephant. The Simla of Adana, and of course, The Dying Princess, which is famous for its incredible emotional depth and realism.
All right, part 3, preserving India's archival memory, digital and physical vaults.
So, shifting gears from physically rebuilding ancient ships to preserving super fragile documents, let's trace the journey of the National Archives of India. It actually started way back in 1891 as the Imperial Record Department in Calcutta. Then, in 1911, it shifted to New Delhi into a building designed by Sir Edwin Lutyens. Fast forward to today, it operates under the Ministry of Culture, managed by the Director General of Archives, who implements the Public Records Act of 1993. This is essentially the ultimate physical vault for our government records.
But while the National Archives handles mountains of physical paper, we've also got some major digital moves happening. Enter the Gyan Bharatam portal. The Prime Minister recently launched this to document, digitize, and showcase India's massive epigraphical heritage. We're talking ancient stone and copperplate inscriptions. Make sure you cleanly distinguish this digital portal from the physical archives in your head. This portal works hand in hand with the Archaeological Survey of India.
And why is going digital such a big deal right now? Well, because we are dealing with handwritten documents from before the printing press even existed. Stuff written on incredibly fragile materials like palm leaves, birch bark, and parchment. India literally holds one of the largest global collections of these, often referred to as the memory of the world. The National Mission for Manuscripts kicked off back in 2003 to conserve these, and now the newly announced Gyan Bharatam mission in the 2025-26 Union budget is going to supercharge this effort. All of this is researched and coordinated by the ASI, which has been around since 1861.
Finally, Section 4, Monuments and Museums, Structuring History.
When we think about structuring history today, we often see massive modern developments. For example, the foundation stone was just laid for the brand new Museum of Royal Kingdoms of India. It's being built in Kevadia, in Gujarat's Narmada district, strategically located right near the Statue of Unity. It's a huge new infrastructure project designed specifically to archive and present dynastic history to the modern public.
And this brilliantly illustrates two very different ways we treat heritage. On one side, you have modern commemoration, building totally new, high-tech infrastructure like that Museum of Royal Kingdoms. But on the flip side, you have historic restoration. Think of 18th century leaders who didn't build new museums to house history, but instead went out and physically rebuilt and restored ancient sacred structures that had fallen into ruin, ensuring cultural continuity.
To really grasp that historic restoration side, you have to know the legacy of Ahilyabai Holkar. She was the Maratha queen of Malwa and an absolute champion of heritage conservation. Mark these exact dates down for your prelims. She rebuilt the Kashi Vishwanath Temple in Varanasi in 1780. She restored the ancient Somnath Temple in Gujarat in 1783. And she rebuilt the Vishnupad Temple in Gaya, Bihar in 1787. Her 1783 restoration of the Somnath Temple is incredibly significant. It essentially laid the historical groundwork for the cultural pride and conservation we still see at the site today, echoing through modern events like the Somnath Swabhiman Parv.
So as we wrap up, remember that heritage isn't just some dusty, static thing of the past. It is an active, ongoing process. Which leaves me with a final thought for you to ponder. From using 5th century cave paintings to build stitched ships, to marveling at 18th century temple restorations, all the way to launching modern digital portals today, how do you think our current conservation methods are going to be viewed by historians centuries from now? Something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep reviewing these facts, and I'll catch you next time as we unpack even more fascinating topics.
All right, let's jump right into it. Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are tackling a high-yield roadmap designed specifically to help you absorb and retain some absolutely crucial cultural and geographical facts for your 2026 UPSC Prelims. We're looking at a carefully curated sweep across history, geography, and international relations to give you that competitive edge.
Here is our agenda for today. First up, spiritual heritage. Second, cultural commodities. Third, international cultural geopolitics. And finally, number 4, indigenous linguistic preservation. Let's get to it.
But before we really unpack the syllabus, I want you to consider this question. What connects a 17th century Sikh guru, a milky white marble from Gujarat, and an ancient Khmer temple? Well, mastering the civil services exam is all about connecting these seemingly unrelated threads of human history.
By the end of this explainer, you're going to see exactly how they all tie into the broader tapestry of our cultural heritage.
Starting off with Section 1, Spiritual Heritage, focusing on Sikhism and Guru Tegh Bahadur.
Okay, so for your baseline understanding, we absolutely need to lock in the chronological progression of Sikhism. It's a monotheistic religion founded in the 15th century in the Punjab region by Guru Nanak. From there, it developed through the teachings of 10 Sikh gurus, ending with Guru Gobind Singh. Following the 10th guru, the Holy Scripture, the Guru Granth Sahib, is regarded as the eternal guru. And you definitely want to note that final vital detail from our sources. The Khalsa was founded in 1699 by Guru Gobind Singh. Getting this baseline down is essential.
Now, let's trace the life of the 9th Sikh Guru, Guru Tegh Bahadur, capturing the critical facts you need for the exam. He was born in 1621 in Amritsar to Mata Nanki and Guru Hargobind, who is the 6th Sikh Guru. Moving chronologically, we see his major structural contribution. He actually founded the city of Anandpur Sahib. Finally, and tragically, this timeline concludes in 1675 when he was executed on the orders of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb in Delhi.
And this is a legacy you definitely need to remember. His profound sacrifice earned him the revered title Hind-di Chadar, which literally translates to the Shield of India. To honor this incredible sacrifice, his martyrdom is commemorated annually as Shahidi Divas every November 24th. It's just a powerful reminder of his historical legacy, blending spiritual leadership with ultimate resilience.
Moving right along to Section 2, Cultural Commodities, where we'll be mapping out the new GI tags.
You know, it's genuinely fascinating how geographical indication tags map regional identity right across the nation. For instance, over in Gujarat, we have the unique milky white Ambaji marble, alongside the Surat-cut diamond, which secured its tag for 2026. Then, traveling south to Tamil Nadu, note the Kumbhakonam betel leaf and Tovalai's Manika Male, which is a famous garland of rubies. Over in Andhra Pradesh, Panduru Khadi from the Srikakulam district gets the tag, and up in Uttar Pradesh, we see the Amra Dolak and Mirat Gajak. Pinning down these specific regional origins is absolute gold for your comparative exam study.
But hey, the products are only half the story. Understanding the underlying legal framework of these tags is just as vital. The GI tag is governed by the GI of Goods Registration and Protection Act of 1999. It's registered by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Make sure you note carefully that a tag is valid for 10 years, though it can be renewed indefinitely to ensure continuous legal protection against imitation. And, crucially for your international economy syllabus, it's recognized globally under Article 22 of the WTO TRIPS Agreement.
All right, shifting gears to Section 3, International Cultural Geopolitics, specifically the Preah-Vihear Temple dispute. Right in the middle of the fiercely disputed boundary lines between Thailand and Cambodia, in the Dangrek Mountains, sits the Preah-Vihear Temple. It's an ancient, stunning masterpiece of Khmer architecture dedicated to Lord Shiva, built way back between the 9th and 12th centuries. The overlapping, conflicting boundary lines across this terrain show exactly why this historical monument is currently such a massive geopolitical flashpoint.
The chronological flow of this dispute is a textbook case study in cultural geopolitics. Back in 1962, the International Court of Justice actually awarded the temple to Cambodia. However, jump forward to 2008, and Cambodia's successful bid to list the temple as a UNESCO World Heritage Site ironically revives some really deep tensions between the two nations. This friction actually escalated into armed clashes between 2008 and 2011. Finally, in 2013, the ICJ had to step back in with an interpretation that firmly reaffirmed Cambodia's sovereignty over the temple area.
Now, to fully grasp the so what of that temple ruling, we've got to understand the mechanics of the International Court of Justice itself, which replaced the League of Nations Permanent Court. The ICJ is the principal judicial organ of the UN, established in 1945. It's headquartered over at The Hague. It consists of 15 judges elected by the UN General Assembly and Security Council for 9-year terms. Remember, its jurisdiction is strictly to settle legal disputes between states, not individuals. And a quick piece of trivia you should definitely pocket for the exam: its official languages are strictly English and French.
Finally, let's wrap things up with Section 4, Indigenous Linguistic Preservation. Let's talk about the Old Chiki script.
So recently, President Draupadi Murmu inaugurated the centennial celebration of the Old Chiki script in New Delhi. This is a massive milestone for the Santal tribe. Why? Because the Old Chiki script, which was created by Pandit Raghunath Murmu, is the linguistic backbone of Santali.
and Santali is officially recognized under the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution. This whole event perfectly highlights the vital intersection of state recognition and tribal identity, ensuring that these indigenous roots remain strong for future generations.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a real thought-provoker for your mains preparation. How does the active preservation of indigenous scripts fundamentally shape a nation's cultural identity on the global stage? Because as we've seen today, from the sacrifices of Sikh gurus to the geopolitical struggles over ancient Khmer temples to the celebration of indigenous languages, culture isn't just history. It is the living, breathing script of our future. Keep that perspective in mind as you continue your studies. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.